So here's the orchid that we'll be repotting today. I went to the sink and I washed the roots. They're very vigorous. You can see that most of them are green and plump. This is good. That means they are producing chlorophyll and that they've seen light. But these ones on the inside, just because they're yellow doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they didn't get any sunlight because this was part of the orchid plug. They're still healthy. They're still absorbing moisture for the plant and nutrients. The green ones are too. As long as they are plump like this, they are healthy. So you don't want to cut those roots. They are healthy and helping the plant grow. This Phalaenopsis is being repotted because the flower spike was done. Now, what I'm doing here is checking each of the roots. You can see here that this is velamen that is rotten. When you squeeze it, it is mushy. It is wet and gross. That is a dead root. This plant mostly had healthy roots on it. I was really pleased. And when I was done, I literally had this root and this root to cut off. That's it. So we're in good shape. The next step was to pick a pot. So the first pot is pretty close in size to the original pot that my orchid was in. It was too small. There were way too many roots saved on it. So I went up one size and checked to see if it would fit. And yeah, there's pretty good space there. I'll probably have to repot in a year, but this was the one that I chose. So now I'm going to start with some sphagnum moss in the base. If you choose to use sphagnum moss in your medium, just make sure to keep it very loose, very fluffy. You don't want to press it down too much. If you do this, it's going to suffocate the roots and the plant will start to suffer. I use a mixture with my Phalaenopsis of Orchiata orchid bark and sphagnum moss from New Zealand. And then I put it in the base so that it can absorb up the water. I live in Southwest Texas. It's very hot. And so can be humid, can be dry. It just depends on the season. So I do alternating layers, making sure that the sphagnum moss touches from the bottom layer all the way up to the top between the rows of orchid bark. This guarantees that the sphagnum moss acts basically like a water wick, pulling the water up from the base all the way to the top of the plant. Again, light and fluffy is the key. When you see me kind of pushing it down, that's just to make sure that it's touching from layer to layer, or that it is going inside the roots, not just around the edges. I want to make sure I get some in the middle where the plug was as well. I'm using the repot me pots, which I actually prefer to use with Oncidium orchids or Dendrobiums because their roots don't get as damaged when you repot. With Phalaenopsis and Cattleya orchids, I prefer unslotted pots. I just didn't have any at this time. So these are really better for Oncidiums with their tiny roots. Same with Dendrobiums. They have thinner roots, so it's easier to rescue the roots from the pot. At this point, I might just speed up the layering process. For your sake, it's just the same pattern over and over again. When I get to the top, I'll pause on one of the sphagnum moss layers to include some slow release fertilizer granules. You always want to put it in a fluffy layer or sphagnum moss layer, because the moisture will help the granules to release the nutrients into the plant's environment so that it can collect them, especially during the growing season. But other than that, it's pretty basic. When I have pumice stone or lava rock available, I include a little bit in my Phalaenopsis because I'm a little bit heavy-handed with water. I just don't have any right now. I had to cancel the order because the pumice stone was back ordered, and so unfortunately it's a little obnoxious to get right now. I may have to switch to the lava rock. Does the same thing. I don't particularly like perlite. It's too small usually to replace pumice stone with. I like a 3/8 inch or bigger, just for the airiness of the media. But lava rock works really well. It's not as pretty in the pot. It's aesthetic purposes only. I'm actually going to leave it. I was going to speed it up, but we're almost done with the sphagnum moss layer here, and I'm about to put in the granules. So this is pretty much how I do a Phalaenopsis orchid. It's very enjoyable. This plant, because I did not repot it when I first bought it, it was really healthy. There were no root problems. There was no dehydration in the leaves. Her flowers lasted, oh yeah, make sure, sorry about that. Make sure to shake it when you're using the orchid bark. You want to get it into the crevices. Orchids like air, but you also want to get the orchid bark into the pockets. The fluffy sphagnum moss and the orchid bark, the pumice stone and the lava rock, it's going to provide the airiness around the roots for these epiphytic plants. So you don't have to leave big pockets of air. That just creates places for pockets of disease, pockets of insects, pests that you really won't be able to see and you don't want for your orchid. You don't want to find a plot of mold or cyanobacteria or mealybugs or whatever it is that you have trouble with, fungus gnats, hiding in the middle of this thing, causing trouble for your orchid. A note on fungus gnats: they don't actually harm the plant directly, but they are a symptom that you are probably overwatering your orchid. So less water is better. In fact, dehydration, this is where I show my granules. I use the Repot Me granular for when I repot, and just 2 little sprinkles for the Phalaenopsis. They're slightly heavier eaters, I found, than my Cattleyas, slightly less than my Dendrobiums and Insidiums, but I use about the same for those 3, less for the Cattleyas. They don't need as much. And now the top layer is going to be the thickest. It's going to be orchid bark. But like I was saying earlier, this orchid, she flowered for 5 months. I bought her in January, and I got to enjoy her beautiful blooms for 5 months. This is May now, so it was really impressive. I'll include a photograph of her picture of her flowers later on. But I really did enjoy her. My experiences with Phalaenopsis, I was not a fan at first. They kept dehydrating on me, wanting to die on me, and I feel like I've been watering them the same way from the beginning to now. Clearly I haven't been, because they don't dehydrate on me anymore. But, I was learning with my plants, and now they're doing a lot better. You'll see me do that several times through the video. Just keep shaking them. If you like this slow video where I don't speed through the actual potting process, let me know in the comments. If it gets a little bit old, let me know in the comments too. Your feedback is going to help me know how to make these videos more interesting for you as growers. I am by no means, or by watchers, I am by no means an expert in orchid growing. I started this hobby last September, and I gotta admit, I'm a little obsessed now. So I've been watching several orchidists on YouTube. I'm part of the Alamo Orchid Society here in San Antonio. I'm getting fantastic advice from them. But I'll also say a lot of it is personal preference. When to use hydrogen peroxide is a big issue for debate in the community, and you're going to find that if you start this hobby, people are very passionate about their opinion. Anyway, here is the end product. Have a great